Hello, everybody. Welcome to Horror 101 with Dr. AC. My name is Aaron Christensen, and today we're going to be celebrating one of the most influential films of the last quarter century, Hideo Nakata's Ring from 1998, or as it was incorrectly anglicized and publicized, Ringu. It's celebrating its 25th anniversary, and in addition to inspiring its own manifold sequels and remakes, it was at the forefront of the millennial wave that became known as J-horror, J, of course, standing for Japanese, although it soon extended to include almost anything from Eastern Asia, including South Korea, Hong Kong, and China. Arrow Video released a fantastic box set of the original Ring films in 2019, and here to talk about that set today are my good friends Dave Kosanke, Jennifer Olson, and Ryan Olson. Come on in, everybody. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the party.
Hello.
So today we're going to be talking about Arrow's Ring collection. And I first want to start off just by kind of asking, what was your first experience with J-horror in general and Ringu? I'm going to call it Ringu just because I can't help myself. And Ringu in particular. Dave, can we start off with you?
Sure. I had read about the film in Fangoria magazine. They did a cover story on it, and one of my friends had a bootleg on VHS, which, considering the content, seems appropriate. But the problem was who knows what generation copy it was, and I didn't think much of it because it was a badly dubbed copy, so I didn't really get the gist of the big hype of what the film was. So it was kind of like it didn't really make an impact on me until I saw the 2002 American version, which is actually what impressed me quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And I became a fan of that. And I hadn't rewatched the original Ring until watching the Arrow set. So a lot of time had elapsed.
Oh, cool.
So that's basically my first introduction to it.
And was that your introduction to what you would call J-horror? Like the millennial J-horror?
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting because then all the American remakes started to follow after that. And again, I was exposed to the American stuff because most of that I saw in the theater when it was new, right. And then went back after the fact to watch the original Japanese versions.
Cool. Well, shifting down to let's start with Jen. What was your first encounter with J-horror in general, and then with the film under current discussion?
Okay, so back in around 2000, I started going to conventions. Went to Motor City Comic Con in Detroit. There was a guy there. He had a table with, it was like shoe boxes full of bootleg VHS, and I snatched up as much J-horror as I could find, and Ringu was in that pile, and I became a fan ever since of the Asian cinema J-horror era.
What led you to grab a big pile of VHS films that you maybe didn't know anything about?
The guy really sold them to me.
Okay.
He said they were bizarre, and he's like nothing you've ever watched before, and I'm like, I want that. So I grabbed as much as I could, and he was selling them for was it $5 a tape or something?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I just grabbed as much as I could.
Sweet. You just kind of immersed yourself.
Yep.
That's
definitely.
Awesome. And Ryan, how about you?
Well, I mean, as far as seeing the originals, I'm a total latecomer to it. I was aware of it. I read about it in Fangoria like Dave had, but I hadn't seen the movie. And Dave and I were buds, and we would hang out and stuff, and we talked about it, and he was kind of like, yeah, it's, all right. And I was like, okay. When the remake came out, he wanted to see it, and we always would be going to see movies together. So I'm like, let's go check out the movie, and I really enjoyed the remake. I thought it was, very good. And that was that. And I never really got around to seeing the original. I just kind of was like, well, maybe I'll see it someday. And,
sure.
Jen, obviously being a big fan, when the Arrow box set came out, she wanted to get it. So we got it, and we just hadn't watched it yet. So when you asked us to take part in this. It was a great excuse to sit down and watch the movies. And,
Well, that's cool.
Finally got him to do it.
Yeah. And I really, really enjoyed it a lot. The first movie was, I mean, I understand and see people's points for, preferring the remake, but I really still like that version. I need to watch it again. I haven't seen it in forever.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the original. There's a lot of stuff about it that really spoke to me. I thought it was just really, really good. I was really pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. And I think, it has been 25 years since the first Ring came out. And I think, it's a long time. We've watched a lot of horror between then and now, J-horror and otherwise. And so I feel like my tastes have also changed because my first exposure was, I didn't know about the original Ring. I just knew that this new, film from Gore Verbinski starring, Naomi Watts. And I'm like, okay, sure, I'll go check it out. It's getting a lot of buzz. And I thought it was really good. I thought it was really scary. Like that opening scene where she discovers her friend in the closet and her face is all twisted. I'm like, oh my gosh. And, like when the end where, the Samara in the American version, Samara's crawling out of the TV. I was like, holy shit, this is terrifying. So when I went, I think similar to Dave, maybe when I went back and saw the original, it's not as kind of supercharged. It's not like hit you over the head style the way the American version is. And I think maybe some of its subtler charms were lost on me. But when on repeat viewings, I've actually said, I actually like this subtler version where I'm like, oh, this feels, what it is? It feels creepier instead of say scarier. It's not like, jump at you scary. It's like, no, this is just going from bad to worse and to worst. So that was my encounter. And it was really my introduction to J-horror as a whole. I remember, I think my next one I saw after this was either Audition or Battle Royale. And I was like, holy mackerel, these Japanese folks have got something going here. And it was really, it was super cool. So basically the story, does anybody want to do like a quick synopsis of the basic setup for the first Ring?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So the idea is that there's the legend of this cursed videotape. And if you watch it, the phone rings, someone says 7 days over the phone, and then a week later you die. Unless, as we find out later, you pass a copy of the tape on to somebody else. And that is the curse of the Ring. Well, as with any good curse, there is a backstory behind it. And we find out that Sadako is a young woman who was thrown into a well by her father. And that there was all sorts of like her mother was psychic and Sadako was psychic. And there was just a lot of, intrigue going on. And then it's about uncovering the mystery. Like, how can we undo the curse? Can you undo the curse? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, where the movie lives. And it inspired, as you were saying offline, there's a whole backstory for the films themselves that I wasn't aware of. Like there's a TV version. Of course, it was based originally on the novel by, I'm going to blank out on his name. Here, Koji Suzuki. Yep. You probably could have just thrown that in, Jen. You wouldn't have to look at your notes. Can you tell us, have you read any of the manga or anything by Suzuki?
I never read the books, unfortunately. I had them at one time and I never read them, though. I know the basis of them, which I find it odd that it was more of a virus being spread instead of a curse.
Right.
It was smallpox, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. But other than that, I never read the stories, unfortunately. I want to now just to see the difference between the movie and the books. The
source material. Yeah. 1991, the first Ring novel came out, and, it became kind of like a little cottage industry for its author. And it seemed like a natural fit to adapt to TV and film. But yeah, it's interesting how the film, because there's also, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but the fact that there was a sequel produced almost simultaneously, they were released together as a double feature.
Yeah.
but directed by two different people, different screenplays, different aesthetics completely. But let's talk first about the first film, which is Ring from 1998. Dave, you kind of just told us a little bit about your first impressions, but it seems like you've warmed up to it a bit.
Yeah, I have. It's kind of like with me, it's all about the presentation. So if you have a copy where you can kind of see and you obviously can understand with the subtitles what's going on, then you have a better idea.
Wait, were you watching? Wait, your first version was unsubtitled?
No, it was subtitled, but
Okay.
again,
I was like, I would be like, what's happening?
I would never be able to watch 2 minutes of it if it wasn't subtitled. But no, it was just horrible. It was a really bad quality bootleg. So it's just like a lot of everything was just like I just couldn't get into it.
Sure.
But now with the Arrow set,
yeah,
that's definitely the best version of it, that I would think
great.
you can get right now. So then I was able to appreciate it like a whole lot more when you finally see it in that presentation. It's essentially like seeing it for the first time, for me anyways. So,
and speaking of seeing it for the first time, Ryan, what was your take on it? And when was the last time you'd seen the Gore Verbinski version? Like, how fresh was that in your mind?
Not really very fresh. I mean, I probably saw it one time when it came out on DVD. I mean, I've probably only seen the movie a couple times. I mean, I did remember it pretty decently, and in preparation for this, I went back and did some reading about it to kind of refresh my memory on some of the more significant stuff with it as far as that. But things that I noticed watching this movie that was very different from the Verbinski version was, like you said, it's a very quiet film, and it's a very sedate atmosphere. And on the surface, it kind of seems like not a lot happens, but there is a lot really going on when you look deeper beneath the surface. I really love the whole ESP angle of it. I liked the whole, like they talked about in one of the extras, the Lovecraftian nature of it, where the Shizuku was sitting there staring at the sea constantly, and there was that relationship between that and what's this other force that was clearly exerting some kind of influence on things. I really liked that. And I also liked that there was such a big focus on the family dynamic.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was very kind of sad and mournful because I mean, this little kid is left alone a lot by his parents, and he's kind of left to fend for himself. And the lead character, she's trying to do the best that she can to look out for him and keep their life going, because her and her husband are separated. And and even when he gets involved too, they still kind of focus on doing what they're doing, and the kid kind of just gets left in the background to his own devices. Right. And it just there's kind of a sadness to that, to me, that maybe, I don't know if it's just what I took out of it, but it's what I noticed, like throughout the whole thing. There's kind of just this sense of sadness and impending doom that's just kind of hangs over the entire movie.
Well, and to kind of contextualize it, I mean, this is coming out of a time when Scream had been really big in '96. And so American audiences were very much, we had been subjected to, I say subjected to, it was, it was a fun nouveau slasher wave, but it was a lot of like young teenagers and very young adults. And it was really kind of great to watch a film that did deal with a more mature, even though we have the child at the center as well. But it's about, like you said, it's about the family. It's about, adults dealing with adult problems, like taking care of your kids and juggling a job and dealing with your ex and, being a woman and trying to prove yourself, in a very male dominant society. Like I thought that was something that really resonated for me. I was like, oh, wow. I love how kind of like this feels like a grown up drama that has ghosts, curse, etc. thrown in as well.
I think what's interesting is the way the films are, the way they initially start. It has a very teenage aspect to
it. Right.
Where these girls are like, hey, have you seen this tape and da-da-da. So it lures you in to think that it could be like a Scream, or it could be something along those lines, where we're going to lure you in with something that could appeal to, younger kids, but then it segues into something much more bigger, than just that could be like a cheap a cheap shot or a cheap way just to lure people in to say, hey, you know, check this out. But instead of like focusing on that with teenagers and high school shenanigans or what have you, then it goes off into something, you know, like you said, adult. But it's interesting because that's a way to like lure, you know, your average person to be like, hey, you know, this concept could appeal to anyone. Anyone could just lure, you know, basically like grab out of that and say, hey, this is interesting, and then take it from there.
Well, and something, speaking of context, like Japanese horror at this point was things along the lines of the Guinea Pig series and, you know, Entrails of a Virgin and Evil Dead Trap. It's like, it was pretty intense stuff, and it was primarily a male audience. And the Ring films, like overwhelmingly, like women were attracted to them. Women were drawn to them because, and I don't know if it's because there was a female in the lead, or if it was talking about kind of more domestic and real world issues, or it was just lighter. It wasn't as emphasized on the gore. It was much more about atmosphere and kind of a lurking dread.
Right.
But I mean, I guess let's talk about like kind of J horror as a whole. Like, you know, Dave and I talked a little bit about the yokai monsters in the past and, you know, the kaiju. And I think like that's kind of one aspect of Japanese fantasy film, but this kind of like just opened up a whole other world for it, where we had things like Battle Royale and Ju-on, The Grudge, and Pulse, you know, things like that. Do you have some like, I'll throw this to Jen. Do you have some favorite kind of like J horror go-tos that, you know, like, yes, Ring was the entryway, but there were others that you discovered?
Dark Waters, which was also written by Suzuki. I enjoyed that one a lot. Even the remake I liked. The American remake of Ring, not so much, but Dark Waters, I enjoyed that remake. Now, with Japanese horror in general, Kwaidan is always one that I go to.
Right.
I love the traditional kind of kabuki type horror. And I think that's why I loved Ringu so much, is because it has the hair in the face and the white kimono style dress. And I think that's why I loved it so much.
Yeah.
But
well,
that's where I started anyways. And that's,
well, yeah, if we cast back, I mean, like, and there's a great I'm going to jump around, but I mean, like on the third disc, there's a documentary called Spooks, Size, and Videotape. And that kind of blew my mind because it was so much information that I had no idea. It was kind of like the yokai monsters all over again. I'm like, I know nothing. I've been watching horror films, but I have clearly just an idiot. Because it talked about all of those, because basically my exposure to Japanese horror was like Onibaba, Kwaidan, Kuroneko, Haozu, you know, things like that. And I'm like, how, you know, I'm all, you know, caught up, but apparently not. Did you guys watch that documentary? And also, like, were you familiar with those films?
I did not get a chance to watch that documentary.
Okay.
I believe Ryan did.
I did.
But I'm familiar with all those films that you mentioned.
Sure. Yeah.
I love those films.
Here I am thinking like I'm deep diving. It's like, no, that's the low hanging fruit, you youngster. I'm like, oh, fine.
Yeah, it's really good. I liked it a lot as well. I mean, you know, I am familiar with some of those ones that you mentioned, like House
kind of the classics
and Kwaidan, and I haven't seen Onibaba, but it's on my want to see list.
We haven't?
No, we don't yet.
I thought we did.
Well, we need to get the criteria, but anyway,
you do need to. Yeah, you do.
Yeah. I mean, there's some of that stuff that I have seen, and then some things that I haven't. But I'm interested. I'm always interested in seeing stuff. I mean, it's one thing that I've loved since I met Jen is that, you know, she has such a fascination with a lot of Asian cinema. So she's shown me a lot of stuff. I mean, I grew up on Kung Fu theater and, you know, kaiju films and stuff. I mean, that's my main influx into a lot of that, you know, a lot of Asian cinema is that. So, you know, but it's been fun to explore and dive into other areas of stuff as well, you know.
Dave, do you have like a kind of like a J horror that jumps out at you that you're a fan of?
I kind of like a lot of the ones you had mentioned, but when I first saw House, that was like really eye-opening. That actually was the film that I did see the first time without subtitles, and it didn't matter because visually it was just, you know, it's just incredible. So that one I actually sat through without subtitles for the first time. But
it doesn't make it any more coherent if you have subtitles. You're like, No,
Wow.
still don't know
Right.
what's going on.
Right. But that was the one that I was always like a big fan of, because it got mixed in with a lot of the other Toho monster stuff
Mhm.
when I was like obsessively getting bootlegs, because I was always more towards Japanese monsters and Japanese superheroes, and that's the stuff I've always liked. But House was another one that kind of like, again, it doesn't fit with that, but it kind of came in with the people who were releasing all that stuff. So I decided to check it out. It was like, wow, this is like amazing.
I remember seeing The Grudge, Ju-on,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember watching it in the middle of the day on videotape. And when that little kid is like crawling down the stairs and making I was like, I'm freaking out here. Like I was I'm so terrified. And I'm sitting here in the middle of on a summer day. And that's when I was kind of like, I think, like, and something they point out, and I hadn't really thought about before, but the exposure after the Ring remake came out and the doors kind of opened and a lot of these J horrors were hitting the video shelves, it's like American audiences realized, oh, there's a brave new world out there. And it wasn't just good for Asian cinema. It was good for all kinds of foreign, like people like learned to read subtitles and they were okay with it. And I feel like it did just kind of kick down the door. So, because suddenly we had like the French wave and we had, stuff coming from Hong Kong, and it was like Korea, it's like people like suddenly were like, I didn't realize there was stuff outside of Hollywood. And that was a really exciting time. I remember that like Spanish horror, like I had a whole renaissance as well. I feel like once Ring came through the door and people were like, I'm down to watch something that I haven't seen before, then it just became a brave new world. And I feel like we're kind of enjoying the fruits of that, from the past 25 years.
I noticed once Ring came out, like at Blockbuster, you would have this whole section from, what was it, Tartan, I think, video.
Right.
That was like, I would just, oh, this looks good. Cool. The cell phone, haunted cell phone. Oh, awesome. I was just trying anything.
Yeah.
I was hungry for it because I just loved their style.
Well, and
and
Dave and I talked about this on the yokai episode, where it's like Japanese culture, like they are willing to push the extreme. Like Takashi Miike, there's nothing from Takashi Miike that Hollywood would ever greenlight. You're like, no, you can't do that.
Even when you learn about some of the aspects of the original novel, which I hadn't, the Ring novel, which I hadn't read, stuff too that would just be like not fly, in the Western world. But for the Japanese culture, there's a lot of things that they have there that are you shake your head when you see some of the content of their their stories. But thankfully, some of that stuff wasn't adapted to the cinema. But again, that's Japanese, so a lot of that stuff definitely is extreme. But except for pubic hair, that has to be censored. That's
right.
vile. That's the vilest thing that you can ever see. So
that's just against God's nature,
Right. Yeah, that's a no-go.
Well, I forget which documentary it was on, so correct me if you remember, Aaron. But there is the one sequence they have of the topless woman who's pleasuring herself with the severed appendage that you see in there. I don't know what movie it's from, but it was like, oh boy. And this was something that, if I remember correctly, they were showing on television. This wasn't even actually a movie. I think it was something that was on Japanese TV. So it's like, I mean, as we all well know, growing up in the 80s and stuff, and just how cinema or television and things were sold. I mean, the idea of that kind of thing going on and just being on TV where, anybody could see it is just like, wow.
Right. You're like, can we move to Japan?
Right.
So I alluded to it. Well, I mean, any kind of like final comments you want to make on the original Ring film, favorite scenes or anything like that?
Oh yeah.
Please.
When I remember the first time I watched it, I had to rewind at least 5 times the ending when she finally comes out of the TV.
It's amazing.
And seeing her fingertips bending because she doesn't have fingernails, and just, but I had to keep rewinding it over and over again because I'm like, I gotta see that again. Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. Dave, anything you want to toss in?
Me personally, I just love the concept, the idea of a cursed videotape, the idea that her anger was recorded.
Yeah.
The videotape recorded her rage, and that was projected on this tape. I mean, just to me, that idea alone is like pretty genius. I gotta say, just that in and of itself, I think is outstanding.
Well, and that's like this great kind of urban legend, and that's how the film starts. It's like there's this cursed videotape, and everybody kind of like leans in and like, tell us about this cursed videotape. Ryan, anything?
I really liked the sequence when they were visiting the island and talking to the uncle, and they were sitting on the rocks, and he was sitting there talking about Sadako's mom and how she was obsessed with the ocean, and that whole thing of talking about that was just the way that he was, his tone, everything about it. It just had this like I said, it kind of invoked that elder gods type atmosphere of just dread, where it just crawled up your spine, and you were just sitting there like, holy man, it's so creepy how it's a complete total less is more type situation. It's no flashy nothing. It's no, stingers or all the usual stuff to make you go, you're supposed to be scared now.
Right.
It's just him sitting there telling them about what he experienced with Sadako's mom and all that. And it was just what he observed. And that was just, it just was so chilling. It was great. Brilliant.
Well, what she was speaking was not of this world.
Yes.
Yeah.
When she was speaking to the sea and it was a language that was not human or whatever. Yeah. It was like, that was like just, whoa.
What you just alluded to, and I think Dave was talking about, like the idea of like, we get these hints that like maybe Sadako's father wasn't human. Like they talk about his real or her real father, and you're like, wait a minute, what? But they don't go, and I love that about it. Like they give you just enough, and it's kind of the perfect urban legend. And it's like, it's simplicity, and they just kind of like lay it out there. They don't explain the science of how it got recorded onto a videotape. They just go, it got recorded on a videotape, and you go with it because it's so simple, and you're trying to figure it out the same way that the characters on screen are.
It's the same.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
it's the same thing with the ESP aspect of it. I liked how they just accepted, she's got these powers. Right. And like her ex-husband, he's got these powers. He sees things. It's not like yes, you do have the part where the reporters kind of call BS on, with all that. But largely, it just seemed like it was just kind of like, well, she's got these powers and he's got these powers. And it just was kind of accepted, Yeah.
Well, and it's worth, the kind of the beauty of this is that you have that kind of supernatural quality, and it's also in this, this fear of technology, which is quaint thinking of, like VCRs as cutting edge technology, but it's like, here we have this technology that can record sound and image, and you can do it at home if you want. You can make recordings. It kind of calls back to me in the 80s going, here I am, I got my two VCRs together and I'm making my own mixtapes. Yeah. And the fact that like you have the Polaroid photos or, the developed photos where the cursed people, their faces are all distorted. And that's kind of an indicator that they've been cursed. It's all these kind of like fun flavors of folklore and technology. And it's a quiet blending. Again, we're not going into like, how does this legend translate into this technology? We just take it for granted.
I think that's more of an aspect too when you deal with the Japanese cinema, or you could actually say foreign cinema in general compared to American, because the American stuff would tend to try to explain it because they feel like, the audience is kind of ignorant and they need to have it spelled out for them. Whereas the foreign stuff is kind of just like, well, we'll leave it up to you because we have a little more respect, for the audience. We don't need to like ABC, it's kind of like you fill in the blank type of thing. And that's always been the case by and large
Yep.
with foreign stuff versus American stuff when you're dealing with remakes and stuff like that. They just feel like American audiences need to be, like, here it is, we have to explain it for you. No, you don't. It's not necessary.
And why do you think that is? Is it the subtitles? Is it the fact that we're already kind of like engaging a different part of our brain? Like, what is it that makes foreign cinema accessible in that kind of illogical way? Like, I'm able, like you said, I'm able to buy things that I read, whereas if I heard that spoken out loud, I'd be like, oh, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think the visual and stylistic aspect of a lot of the foreign stuff has always been more in the forefront versus like the plot and linear script and things like that. It's
Right.
just regardless of what part of the world you're dealing with, it's just kind of been my experience immersing my stuff in foreign cinema over the years, where it's just never, and again, there are some exceptions, but by and large, they kind of forego a lot of the explanation part because again, it's more or less, it's kind of like irrelevant. Like you said, Aaron, you kind of just tend to go with it.
Yeah.
Unless it's something completely preposterous where you're like, okay, I give up. But by and large, it just doesn't seem to be a general rule of thumb for foreign cinema, and especially Japanese stuff. Because again, the Japanese stuff kind of plays by its own rules, and you either accept it or you don't.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be
kind of the art. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say that that's kind of the art of it, though, is that it doesn't explain thing, and it lets you come to your own conclusions in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's funny we've been saying that because then we go to the sequel, the first sequel, which was released simultaneously, which still blows my mind. I'm like, that, like that would never happen in the US. You'd be like, well, we got to make sure this makes its money first, and then we'll greenlight a sequel because we got to make sure we make some money. But this film Spiral from 1998, released the same year, where they actually do try and explain a lot of this stuff. And it takes a whole different kind of stylistic aesthetic. Anybody want to talk to that first?
I think, from my perspective, it's a pretty heady concept. I mean, there's actually a lot of concepts that they introduce that I know watching some of the featurettes, they had kind of said that it didn't do well, that a lot of people didn't like it.
Right.
And, viewing it now, when you put it in context with the first one, I can kind of see why, because it is a lot to wrap your head around. I mean, they're basically dealing with, I guess, for lack of a better thing, like regenerating bodies again, that's not really explained that well, but it's all of a sudden like somebody's child dies, but yet they can bring it back to life. And then they add another concept in there where it's not just a videotape, but now just writing. Like having a thing in a notebook or whatever, that can be cursed.
Right.
The writing can be a curse if you just read it. So, I mean, they're throwing a lot of things at you that you're like, wait a minute, this wasn't, part of the original deal. But so you really got to like chew on it a little bit because you're like, what's going on here? I mean, it goes way out into like left field.
Way out.
What were
the whole
your
tumor in the neck and everything? Instead of being scared by Sadako herself, now you just get it goes back to the books where
Right.
It goes back to the virus that you contract by the curse. And then you get like a tumor in your neck and it causes a heart attack. I don't know.
But I got the sense offline, at least, that you weren't as wild about this one. You want to tell us some of your issues?
A lot of my issues was just I enjoy the ESP and more psychic storyline of the first one, and then they switch gears and go into a more of a virus.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see more of Sadako as the vengeful ghost coming out of the well, and not some seductress that is trying to rebirth herself through another girl.
Right.
And I didn't like the fact that the I can't remember the psychic man from the first one, the lead actor.
Takashi's the character.
Yes, Takashi, thank you. Him coming back as like her companion, like he was joining forces with her to take over the world, and it just didn't work for me.
Ryan?
Well, they kind of transpose, like, at least to me, they kind of transpose it where like it starts off as being a cursed videotape, but then the curse translates to all of a sudden now when you read the lady from the first one's notes that has the curse now. And then they were trying to get it to where by the end it was on some kind of a thing where they are uploading it and everybody was going to see it, and then it was going to infect the whole world, like what Jen was saying. And I mean, a lot of the points she brought up were things that I didn't agree with. I didn't like how they made the ex-husband a bad guy, and just the whole idea of all of a sudden they're gonna have her be reborn the way she is, and the other, like how it switches from like a female lead to a male lead in this one.
Yep.
And he kind of all of a sudden just goes, well, I can get my son back that I lost, so it's okay. I'll sacrifice the rest of the world so I can have my kid back. Which, I mean, that's kind of, it's understandable from a perspective of how parents could be about love and all those kind of things. But it's like, I don't know, it just goes so, like Dave said, off into left field that it just, I mean, it's not, I mean, if the book is like that, because they say that the Spiral movie is supposed to be closer to the novel.
Right.
I mean, it's like, boy, the book series just must go off into like, outer space or something, because holy weird, it's not bad, but it just doesn't really hold up from the first movie to me.
Well, and I think, the aesthetics, and this is coming from a different director, is I think the aesthetics are so different as well. And almost kind of like the intention. It isn't about like setting up scares, and it's about kind of like explaining and laying out a larger plot, which I'm fine with, but at the same time, I'm not, because one of the things that's so great about the original Ring is it sets up the rules. It keeps it very simple. And then you just play within those rules. And there's a mystery of, how is this curse happening? Is there a way to lift the curse? And in service of a sequel, you have to kind of break those rules and extend those rules. It's kind of like, it's why I don't necessarily love episodic TV, because the point is to keep the story going. Whereas with a movie, it's like, we got to have a beginning, middle, end, and then we need to lock it down. Which brings us to, because Spiral didn't do so hot, but because Ring had done so well, they brought back Hideo Nakata and his team, and they made Ring 2 in the following year. And it very much follows the same aesthetics and storyline and rules, etc. And it also plays around with it a little at the same time. Jen, you want to talk to that one?
I did enjoy this one much better than Spiral, just because it did carry on the storyline of the girlfriend, student girlfriend, May, and her becoming the investigator, trying to figure out what happened. I enjoyed that a lot.
Which kind of made more sense, because she was in, she had that relationship with the man in the first one. So, I mean, it just kind of, okay, well, this makes sense that it's going to go where it's going to go. I mean, there was some things that they added to it. I mean, talking about Sadako saying that she was living in that well for like 30 years. I mean, that's a whole nightmare on its own kind of thing, which, I mean, lends even more to the fact that there had to be some kind of a extra supernatural force or some kind of thing involved, because it'd be kind of hard to think, how would you survive in a well for 30 years like that, and just add to the madness of being stuck down there in the dark. I mean, that would just be, boy, oh boy.
I got to say, like, and then I'll bounce over to you, Dave, that addition of the mythology of the 30 years alive in a well, that kind of took me out of it. Cause I'm like you, I'm kind of like, how would that even work? Like, like the fact that she was put in there alive, and they say that in the first one, like that to me is all the horror you need.
Right.
That's somebody who's stuck in a well and is basically going to die of starvation and dehydration. Like, I don't need you to be doing that for 30 years, because then I go, well, that's impossible. You can't do that for 30 years. Like if somebody like sneaking food in, like through the lid, like how does that, like, how would that work? So that was one thing that did kind of like threw me a little bit. I was like, I wish you hadn't said that, because now I can never unhear that.
No,
Dave?
I agree. That's a good point. I think that there's elements of the second one where they could hint at possible directions to go from that. Like, for example, instead of having her, like they said, where she's been alive in the well for 30 years, have it where it, like, her spirit would be like the thing that, like, comes back and inhabits, for example, the son, Yoichi.
Yeah.
Where it channels in him, and his anger channels Sadako. I mean, there's elements where they talk about that, and I think that would be kind of a good way that they could have, like, veered off into a direction that would make sense in a sequel like that. But yeah, that aspect of it threw me off as well, where it's just kind of like, well, it's interesting, but that one's pretty hard to swallow.
And I like the fact that they brought back, you know, the girl from the first film, the one whose friend, you know, is cursed, and that she is kind of like peripherally damaged. It's like collateral damage, and that she's also got the psychic, you know, qualities where she's kind of retaining Sadako's film in her head, and she can't be near TVs. And we find out later that if she is near a TV, that she projects Sadako's vision onto the television. And, like, I love that scene actually in the hospital, where it's like, oh shit, she's gonna, like, kill this entire room full of patients.
Right.
That was one of the best parts of that too. Although I got to say, I wasn't a fan of that. They brought back the female lead from the original just to kill her off right away. That kind of really bummed me out.
Where she died, though, and the blood's coming towards the child,
beautiful.
Like, and him just looking at it. That was a artistically a great scene.
Yeah,
but it was so heart-wrenching at the same time.
Yeah, it was kind of like, hasn't enough happened that it's like, oh, you're just gonna, you know. I mean, I agree. The scene itself was great and beautiful in the way they did everything. But I was just like, really, because you really, you care about her, so you don't want to see that happen. I mean, obviously in Spiral it's worse because they just totally take them out. I mean, they pull a Newt and Michael Biehn character from Alien 3 with them. So both ways are whatever, but at least in 2, Yoichi survives and you get more with him, which was good. So
what's funny is I was going to make a reference to a show we did a couple weeks back of the Halloween H2O versus the Halloween 2018, where it's almost like a replacement sequel. It's like, that didn't happen. This is what happened. I feel like this is kind of the same thing. It's like, you got Ring 2. It's like, don't pay no attention to that thing that happened over there. But kind of to your point, Ryan, like, I felt like bringing back the mom character was kind of like Halloween Resurrection, where it's like, we're going to bring back Laurie Strode just to kill her off in the first 5 minutes and be like, fuck you. And I'm like, oh, what? Why'd you do that? Like, I love her. Why'd you do that to me? And then that brings us to our final film in the box set, which is Ring Birthday from 2000. And that is a prequel. It shows us Sadako before she gets tossed down the well. And this is one, to your point, Dave, where it's just like, all the rules are just like, what is even happening? I just kind of have to go along with it. If I want to follow this, if I want to enjoy this movie at all, I just kind of have to be like, okay, fine, if you say so.
I think, for me, once they get into the 30 years prior, and it takes place in whatever year, I don't think they said, whatever, early 70s or whatever it would be. Then aesthetically it changes. It becomes, to me, just as observing it as a viewer, it's elements of it were very Stephen King Carrie-ish in the term of, you have a group of kids, they're a theater troupe, and Sadako has these powers and everybody thinks she's this weird girl, but yet she ends up getting the lead because, the other girl mysteriously dies off or whatever. So she's basically the lead. She falls in love with this one guy, and then they have this romance thing going on. And then it veers off into where she has this breakdown, again, just like the prom, but again, it's at the theater where they have the big thing of their play or whatever. And then it goes off where they try to, like, figure out her father. And then you find there's another Sadako where it's almost like she split, so you got a good and a bad.
Yep.
And then there's all these, like, weird things that, like, happen. And again, you're just kind of like, well, how does this play out? But I was interested because I literally didn't know what was going to happen next.
Yeah.
So I sat there thinking, well, this at least has my interest in that aspect, because I have no idea where you're going. So I was kind of, like you said, just along for the ride, but I just thought it was great. I mean, it was very weird because you had almost like the angry villagers, the mob coming out. I mean, so there's all these like different things thrown in there, but I found it very interesting for that alone.
I absolutely agree. And as I said, I was just kind of like, okay, if you say so. I'm in. Like the second they were like, there's two of them. I'm like, there's two of them. Also, I was like, wait, she's like a young, she's like an adolescent. And this is 30 years ago. So wait, when did she get thrown in the well? And like my brain is just like cooking, going, I don't know how this is going to work. And whether it works or not, I guess is, your mileage may vary, because I'm like there were some things where I was being taken out of the movie trying to figure it out, and then having to kind of jump back in and be like, okay, wait, who's that again? And why does she have a German, revolver or not revolver, but a German pistol? Who was that woman anyway?
She was a reporter.
Right. And
right. I don't know who she was, but she was a reporter.
What she wasn't at the original like demonstration of Sadako's mother, was she?
No, she wasn't.
She knew people from it. I wasn't sure why she had such a personal investment in it.
I didn't get why either, other than she was investigating it somehow.
Right.
Well,
yeah, but I got that she had something personal, like she had some kind of personal attachment to it.
It seemed to me that she was, had come across the story of what happened and was curious about it, and she was investigating that. That's what my take was of it, was that she was, just somebody who came. They don't really say how she came across the story. It's just she was, like, this is weird, and started, kind of investigating that stuff, and heard about the Sadako character, the person.
Right.
And, was kind of trying to find her and track her down. And then, when she does find her with the troop, obviously all these things are going on. I mean, you have the movie, to me, which I really enjoyed this one, by the way, after the first one. I like this one the most of the other three films. But I really liked how they go into so much more of, they kind of amp up the supernatural aspect of it, where it's like, she literally splits into these two different beings, and then her dad was giving the evil one drugs to limit the growth so that it wouldn't keep growing, and literally separated them.
Its full power.
Right. I mean, he was, he clearly wanted to keep them separate, and that's why he sent her off, so that the two halves wouldn't be together.
Right.
But of course, everything obviously leads back to where they eventually end up coming back together. I mean, to me, it really amps up the tragedy of it. Like,
100%.
Because when you look at the first movie and they show the part with the reporters and how she kills the guy, and you just kind of think when you see it, oh man, the little kid's just pure evil. Well, when you really think about it, it's a little girl who has these powers. She has no idea what they are, probably no idea how to control them. Seeing her mom being attacked by this horde of guys yelling at her, and she probably just instinctively reacted and may have accidentally killed the guy, but it turned her into a monster. And she was this evil, this evil has followed her from that point. And it's like, then of course, with this movie, you get the split of the two, and he was trying to protect her, but she ends up getting drawn back together, and ultimately her dad realizes that there's only one thing to do, and that's to get rid of her, and thus how she ends up in the well. Yeah. But after all of it, it's a really tragic story for this character. I mean, really, at the end of the day.
Well, she split when her mother threw herself in the volcano, I believe they said.
Oh, okay.
So it was like the tragedy of her mother committing suicide is what made her split. It kind of like how tragedy can cause multiple personalities in people. I think that's kind of where it was going.
Nice. I like, and what's something I found interesting, and forgive me if I get too psychobabble on this one, but I was like, it's fun how the first films are dealing with technology, television, and recordings, and the fourth film, the prequel, deals with theater. It deals with live performance, so it isn't recorded. You know, they are using recordings like for the audio cues and things like that. But it is harkening back to a time when live performance was the way you did things, kind of like kabuki theater, you know, like I kind of like that. And another thing that kind of jumped out at me was that when the TV goes off, what happens is it's a reflection of us. You know, like we see ourselves reflected in the TV, and that maybe the reason why we have the TV on is so we don't have to look at ourselves too closely. And I was like, wow, there's like, because that's, you know, the idea of watching theater is that you're watching yourself, the human experience reflected back at you, you know, and you get that sense of catharsis. That's the whole, you know, origin of Greek theater, is that it was all about catharsis. And, you know, for Sadako, you know, who's this aspiring actress, who I agree, Dave, is such a Carrie vibe going on there, where she is both monster and victim. And she's kind of wholly sympathetic in this version. You know, like she isn't the monster. She's, you know, like the misunderstood monster. She's like the Frankenstein monster, where you're like, I'm
She's
so
got healing
sorry.
abilities all of a sudden. You know?
Yeah. She even makes that comment when she's talking to her love interest in the movie, and he's like, why did you become an actor? What made you, you know, want to do that? And she's like, well, I can become someone else. I don't have to be me anymore. I can be somebody else. Because clearly, you know, she had things that were haunted in her life, and there was things about her. I mean, you could tell from the minute that even though she's the good side of the Sadako character, there's still something very off about her and very like not normal. I mean, she makes comments like, I do things and I don't remember what I did. But I mean, to me, when she tells him that, she makes that comment of, I don't have to be me anymore. I can be someone else. And that says a lot, you know, about her condition and mental state and where she is.
No, that's a really great comment, Ryan. I want to talk a little bit about the box set itself, some of the extras, because the commentary by David Kalat, who is on the first Ring film, was fantastic, because it really does lay out the whole how this came to be. Because I think, you know, like many of us, we think of, well, Ring is the one that kicked off the J-horror craze. And he does this really great contextualizing of where Ring came from, where Hideo Nakata came from, where Koji Suzuki came from. Like, it's like, it didn't just like, you know, it wasn't just lightning in a bottle. It was slowly building up to a situation under which this could happen. And so I highly recommend that commentary track. And then Alexandra Heller-Nicholas provides the commentary track for Ring Birthday. And while I haven't listened to that track, I did watch her Circumnavigating Ring little featurette, and wow, like it's fantastic. It does similar to what Kalat does in terms of kind of contextualizing it all. So I highly recommend those two featurettes. Did anybody else watch like the Ring Legacy? The first one?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I watched all the stuff on it except for the commentaries and you know, like that. But I thought it was really good. I mean, it was really cool to see, you know, how they show the impact of the movies and just how it all plays out. I mean, you know, all the featurettes on there are really good. I mean, I like the deep dive into just the kind of the history of horror in Japan and cinema, cinema, and how it came about, and you know, the legacy focusing on just the franchise and everything else that goes with it. I mean, it's all really great, fascinating stuff. I mean, if you have any kind of an interest in that stuff, there's a lot of, I mean, for somebody like myself, who's definitely not an expert when it comes to that, I felt like I learned a lot and I was really fascinated. And it gave me some stuff where I'm like, you know, hey, I need to maybe see about, you know, talking to Jen here to see if she knows some of this stuff, and we either have it or we can find it and watch it. You know?
Yeah, I think that's just it. Like, I think anybody who buys this box set is going to be rewarded, because it isn't just going to be telling them what they already know. It's telling them, you know, it provides so much background and then some, you know, like it looks forward, it looks back, it looks sideways, it looks deep. If you're not familiar with these films, you're going to feel really intimately familiar with them thanks to these featurettes. And if you are familiar with these films, it's like you're sitting down with somebody who can talk at your level.
I kind of felt that way too, because a lot of the stuff that I was exposed to was all the American films. So a lot of the stuff to me is new as well. And then a lot of those featurettes, they do have people go back and forth talking about the American versions of it compared to the original Japanese version. So I enjoy all that, all those comments and everything too. So very interesting stuff.
Quick off the record, I saw Akira for the first time on a bootleg VHS with no subtitles before I finally saw it in English, subtitled in a theater. So I watched it a whole bunch of times, had no idea what it was about, but it was amazing. But anyway, that's it's definitely the presentation makes a difference, and it really, really is an awesome looking set.
Yeah, that was my audition experience, was no subtitles. Like somebody's just like, you got to watch this. And I'm like, I don't even know what's happening. And I'm completely horrified. And what the fuck is in that bag? And
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. You're like, I don't know what she's saying, but I don't want to be there. Cool. Yeah. And go ahead, Dave.
No, I was just gonna say, kind of my summary of the box set would be it reads to me, it's like a chapter of a book. It's like one chapter of a book that has a lot of different levels to it, but it's a very good chapter of a very important part of cinema history that maybe a lot of people don't know about. Some people do, but you'll get a good reading of, like you said, Aaron, of the past, present, and even the future of it. So it's a good block to have, in anyone's collection when they are a fan of that type of cinema, for sure.
Agreed. Well, and I think that's kind of the thing, is that I do consider myself a pretty well-versed horror fan. And whenever I'm exposed to something that completely, makes me feel like a third grader again, that's exciting. It's like, wow, there's still so much more to learn. There's still so much more to experience. And that excites me as a horror fan. Like, I don't want to feel like I've seen it all. I want to feel like, oh, I've barely scratched the surface and there's so much more out there to keep discovering.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much for dropping by. We're going to definitely do this again. Until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.